What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Super Draft Breakdown Show. I am Turd Ferguson. I'm going to be giving you some of my favorite plays over on Super Draft, over on today's NBA slate. Might even get into baseball. Who knows? I'm not sure. I've been scrambling all morning. I am sleep deprived because guess what? Baseball season starts tomorrow, but we don't care. We've got NBA right now, and I'm coming right off a win on Super Draft slate last night. That's right. Got first and second in their GBP because I'm the greatest in the world. And gosh darn it, am I humble. If you have not signed up for it yet, you're making bad life choices. Sign up using promo code Grinders. Get a free $50 instant bonus. Boom, cash money you can use to play right away. Just got to play through it once and insurance. Plus, deposit match up to $500. Deposit $500. Get that deposit bonus. Drips in at 4% rate. Boom, free money, getting rid of the rake that they already don't have because guess what? They have overlay almost every single day. It's fantastic. It's my favorite site. I am happy about it. I'm excited for baseball season. I'm excited for basketball season to keep going, but fantastic site. No salary cap. Play whoever you want. Everyone's based on a multiplier. Literally, you throw in 3 guards, 3 forwards, 1 center. Boom, you're done. Don't have to worry about mixing and matching, trying to figure out that lineup that's under the salary cap because it's all multipliers. So James Harden projected for 63.69 points. He gets 63 points. Boom. That's how much he gets because he's at 1x multiplier. De'Aaron Fox, 1.3x multiplier. He's projected for 48 points. He gets 48 points. Boom. He gets 60 because you times 48 times 1.3. Don't know if my math's correct. Don't really care right now. It's too darn early in the morning for me, but he should get about 60 points. So whatever his total points are, multiply that by 3. Similar to DK and FanDuel scoring. 3 points for a block, 3 points for a steal, minus 1 point for a turnover. And then like DraftKings, 3.5 points for a 3-pointer, 1.5 for an assist, 1.25 for a rebound, plus the double-double and triple-double bonus. So a little bit of mix of both. Get a lot more room for upside with the 3 points, blocks, and steals. But we've got a fantastic slate. If you guys haven't watched the show before, go ahead. Any questions you have throughout the course of the show, go ahead and throw into chat and I'll get to them. We're going to be dissecting everything for this NBA slate, and it's an interesting one. I already got news that Mitchell is going to be out on this, so immediately a lot of Utah guys stand out as both great GPP plays and 1 or 2 good cash game plays. But it's a fantastic little slate here. Like I said, 3 guards, 3 forwards, 1 center. So we're going to break right down into it here. Start off with the center position, and the center position is a little bit tough. Guys that immediately jump off the page as the best plays. Karl Anthony Towns, huge pace down matchup going up against the Knicks. Knicks are a very good defensive team. So I'm not entirely certain where I'm going to go with cash on this slate. Honestly, like it could be Gobert. As you can see, I have Vooch highlighted for cash. Blue means cash. Green, more tournaments. I have Randall highlighted for cash. I have Cat highlighted for cash. I might end up using them at forward position. But Vooch, we don't know about the Levine news. We don't know about the White news. If both White and Levine are out, there's a huge, huge usage spot for Vooch, who's still at a 1.2x multiplier. Seems a little bit high as of right now. If Levine ends up playing, I don't have really any interest in him almost at all. Like, very well could end up crushing even with Levine in there. But more than likely, we see his median outcome here at a 1.2x multiplier of around 50. If Levine is ruled out, I expect that to go up close to 57, 58. He's my cash game guy. If we don't get news beforehand, I'll probably shy away from him in cash. But in tournaments, I will absolutely have some of them because there are guys that I can pivot to. Again, they have a 8 o'clock my time, so 10 o'clock Eastern start time. The last game before that is a 8:30 start Eastern time. So there is a little bit of strategy to this. If you need to, if you don't want to play a whole bunch of Vooch, if Levine ends up playing, then you can swap over to Drummond, which makes an interesting play. We don't know what his minutes limit is going to be. Haven't gotten news on that. It's a matchup versus Milwaukee, who fast pace. Drummond could end up doing a lot, but we don't know how out of shape he is. He hasn't played in a month. So we don't really know exactly how many minutes he's going to play. They still have Harrell, but they need a playmaker. They need some talent in that lineup. It's really hurting without Davis and without LeBron. So I don't know exactly how it's going to end up. But at 1.5x, if he gets 30 minutes, we know Drummond can absolutely crush from a fantasy perspective in 30 minutes. They're probably going to need some size going up against Giannis and Brolo in that starting lineup. So trying to figure out what to do is a little bit tough on this slate, but we got a lot of options at center here. So I already talked about Gobert without Mitchell in there. Not a huge increase for Gobert, but more than likely this game is going to end up staying close. And Gobert is going to play a boatload of minutes. Even at 1.25x multiplier, he can crush. Randall, big pace upgrade for the Knicks going up against the Wolves, who are, I think, third in pace, plus big defensive boost because the Timberwolves, I think, are 28th in terms of defensive efficiency. So Randall in a great spot. Randall, 1.2x multiplier, is a guy that I will definitely end up using, probably more at the forward position because forward's kind of weak. But you can use him at center. You can do whatever you want. Porzingis offers you a pretty high ceiling. As you can see, these are just the RG projections here. We got the RG median, floor, and ceiling projections just multiplied by the multiplier. It's that simple. Create the spreadsheet, try to make one for baseball. Didn't work and didn't have enough time because, gosh, baseball season and NBA overlap is just exhausting, but I love it. Going to be a ton of money to be made. Again, guys, get signed up using promo code Grinders over on Superdraft. Get that deposit bonus. But, guys, any questions, go ahead and drop in the chat. We keep going. Valanciunas always offers a high ceiling. Not an easy matchup going up against Gobert. Never know what his minutes are going to be, but 1.35x multiplier. He can still get it done on a point-per-minute basis, and if he gets some extra minutes, he can end up smashing. Ayton, second with back-to-back, has been getting more minutes recently, been right around the mid-30s, low 30s in every single game, but second in with back-to-back. Don't know if that's going to continue. They may need him a little bit more going up against Vooch. 1.4x multiplier. I think that, honestly, if Levine's out, then that's a little bit of a boost to Ayton. This game might not stay close, but Ayton will be needed for more minutes, and Vooch is going to be handling ball a lot. Gives a little bit of a boost to blocks, a little bit of a boost for boards because he'll be on Vooch pretty much the entire game. He can end up smashing. Don't mind that multiplier, but there's always a chance he gets into foul trouble or there's a blowout. So not the safest guy in the world. Poeltl, 1.65x multiplier. Had a 35-point game, I think, against Sacramento last time they played, but it was a blowout. He could have been in for an extra 2-3 minutes. Matchup versus Holmes is a pretty good one. Don't mind him for tournaments. Moses Brown can end up with 50 points any given night. He can end up with dub, but he can end up with 50 points. The guy is a beast right now. Potential for 20 boards and 20 points every single game. Guy is talented. I don't mind using him in a match versus Toronto, even at this low multiplier. Harrell, just out for me. Like, I don't know how Drummond's minutes are going to affect Harrell, but I can expect Harrell to have a decrease in minutes. They already don't want to play him too much anyways. They're just kind of forced into it because they need some guy who can make plays off the bench. So Harrell, likely out entirely. Robert Williams, always in play for tournaments, getting a decent amount of minutes, gets those blocks and steals, which gives him a much higher ceiling over on Superdraft because of those 3-point block and steal, plus his low multiplier isn't going to help a ton. But in play, that's pretty much it for center. Center, there are a decent amount of plays, but considering the 10-game slate, there's not as many as I'd hope, and the ones that really stand out are Cat, Randall, Gobert, and Vooch, and Vooch is mostly dependent on Levine into missing. So we'll move on over to forward here. Boom, going on over to forward here in my spreadsheet. Giannis stands off the page. Lakers, obviously, not a great matchup if we look at year-long pace and year-long defensive efficiency, but they're not the same defensive efficiency as they have been, and that's because Davis and LeBron are both out. So obviously a huge hit. So Giannis, even at 1.05x multiplier, probably a guy I'll be looking at in cash, probably a decent amount in tournament, always has a pretty high ceiling, and the spread for some reason is only at 9 points. So he's a guy that I will end up with a decent amount of. Cat, already talked about, not a great matchup. It's just that multiplier is at 1.15x. Have to consider him in tournaments. Kuzma, 1.5x multiplier. Don't know how Drummond's going to affect him. But regardless, he's still in play. He's going to play a decent amount of minutes. Going to do a lot on the offensive end. Like him. Don't know if I'll end up getting there in cash. OG, 1.65x multiplier. They haven't adjusted it. With Powell leaving, OG is playing a boatload of minutes. He's doing a lot of work. It's a good matchup versus OKC. I like him quite a bit in tournaments. Could potentially end up getting there in cash. I'm honestly not certain at this point. Got to see how things play out throughout the course of the day. Luka is Luka. It's a matchup versus Boston. It's not great, but even at 1x multiplier, he can go for 80 in any given game. Randall, already talked about. Roby's an interesting one. Him, Brown, Pokuševski, all playing a decent amount of minutes because that's their big guy rotation. I like the multiplier on him. He could potentially be in for a big game if Brown doesn't. I would not play Brown and him together. Brown can always get into foul trouble. They could give Brown less minutes, although they have no reason to. They already signed him to a contract for 3 years, and because of that, they probably just want to give him some experience, get him get him going, get him entrenched into this offense, like really build him as a player. So I don't know how much Roby will end up getting run, but with this high multiplier, has one of the biggest ceilings on the slate, has a pretty decent floor because he should end up getting minutes and has potential, even in a matchup versus Toronto, who has been a little bit weak against big guys this season. Barrett, 1.55x multiplier. Again, good matchup going up against Minnesota. Fast-paced, bad defensive team. Barrett, I think at 1.55x is definitely a good play. And if Rose ends up getting ruled out, a little bit more minutes for the guard rotation here. I could see him getting into the high 30s. I could see him likely getting into the high 30s. So definitely don't mind him at all. Holmes, 1.4x, matchup versus San Antonio. Like him a lot. He's going to play a lot of minutes, and there's a decent chance that he ends up playing high 30s minutes. Last game versus them was a blowout. He only ended up with 31 minutes. So he's a guy definitely in play. Sorry, a little bit tired. Again, not a ton of sleep. Siakam, 1.3x, like him. Porzingis, 1.3x, again, offering a high ceiling. Ingles is probably my favorite tournament play on the slate. Ingles, without Mitchell in the lineup, without him playing today, likely gets into the starting lineup here, and I think that he ends up crushing. The guy's going to handle the point a decent amount in this game, gets a ton of threes, absolutely can crush here. DeRozan, not sure about 1.3x, seems a little low. Match versus Sacramento is one of the best on the board, so he's a guy that's in play for tournaments. Tatum don't have highlighted yet. That all comes down to the Jaylen Brown news. If Jaylen Brown ends up missing, then Tatum becomes a fantastic play. Moves up probably into the cash game consideration. Absolutely love him. Wood, if Wall ends up missing, much, much better play. It's a matchup versus Brooklyn. Brooklyn is one of the best matchups on the board. Obviously, one of the faster-paced teams. Horrible defensively. Christian Wood takes up a bunch of usage in this offense. And without Wall, him and Porter are going to be eating up all the usage. So Wood more dependent on if Wall ends up missing, but he's still in play regardless because the guy can put up a massive outing any given game, and it's just a picture-perfect matchup here. Levine, not expecting him to play. Even if he does, probably not a great play. 1.25x with Vooch in there, eating into his usage a decent amount. And let's be honest, Phoenix is not a great matchup. Run at a slow pace, decent defensively. So Levine, I'm not going to argue with in tournaments, but not a guy that I'll consider. Bogdanovich, don't have him highlighted, but 1.8 multiplier. If he ends up getting hot shooting, which he's kind of been a lost guy in this offense with everyone else. But without Mitchell in there, we could see him getting a boost in terms of minutes, a boost in terms of usage. And if he gets hot from behind the arc at a 1.8x multiplier, getting 3.5 points for three-pointers, he can end up with 6-7 of them. And a 1.8x multiplier, 7 times 3 is what, 24, 1.8x. So that's almost 50 points right there. If he gets hot shooting, he will end up crushing and being a slate breaker. Not going to have a ton of ownership in him, but probably 10 to 15%, which is a decent amount. And I expect him to go a little bit lower owned than that. So a guy that in tournaments can definitely help you take down a GPP if he ends up getting hot. And honestly, his floor is projected at 28. I think it's a little bit higher than that just because of Mitchell being out. There's a huge, huge usage hole. Around 30%. Yes, Clarkson will end up getting a little bit more run coming off the bench there, and he eats up a ton of usage. So there's not going to be a ton of minutes where Bogdanovich is in the game where Clarkson is not, and he's going to be taking up everything, but still has a guy that has a decent ceiling. Outside of that, Brown's fine, but not great. It's a good matchup versus Dallas. Harrell, already talked about him. Jerome can end up getting minutes any given game. 1.9x multiplier is pretty high, but not a guy I'm considering. Robert Williams, already talked about him. Civi, Brooks, not guys I'm interested in. Thad Young, if Levine ends up missing, Thad Young could be in for a little bit extra usage and a little bit more minutes just because they are down a few guys, especially if White's out. I know he doesn't run the point, and that he's a big guy and they have Vooch there, but still could end up with a decent amount of minutes. After that, just no one really interests me. Kevin Porter Jr. is 100% dependent on Wall missing. Kevin Porter, if Wall ends up missing, Kevin Porter Jr.'s multiplier isn't quite high enough, but the matchup makes me a little bit interested in him. Probably more in play over in DraftKings and FanDuel, where he's around 6K or slightly less than 6K, I think, over on FanDuel. But that's basically it for forward here. We're chugging right along. Again, guys, you got any questions, go ahead and drop them into chat. and I'll get to them before the show ends, hopefully. But guard, Harden, revenge versus Houston. Fantastic spot. Don't care if it's 1x. Again, this game could end up being a blowout, but I don't care. Harden, revenge narrative, going to end up crushing, going to end up doing everything. Probably a guy that I'll end up with a ton of ownership in the tournaments, even at a 1x multiplier. And in cash, I think he's your go-to guy. Like, cash for guard is pretty darn simple for me. It's Harden. It's De'Aaron Fox, who's been averaging, 30 points per game, real-life points, over the course of the entire month. 1.3x multiplier against San Antonio. Pretty much a lock and load for me in cash. Going to be a highly owned guy for me in tournaments. Clarkson, 1.6x multiplier, far too high. Like, it's just that simple. They didn't know that Mitchell was going to be out. They didn't have time to adjust. Mitchell news came out at almost midnight Eastern time last night. So they didn't have time to adjust. It's just real simple. Clarkson is my cash game guy for guard, my third cash game guy. Cash game is just set. Maybe things could change based on injuries throughout the course of the day, but I doubt it. It's probably going to end up being those three guys in cash, and I'll have a heavy amount of them in my tournaments. We got a question. Mindset for rostering high-end $100 single entries. This is mostly a super draft show, but honestly, just treat it as if it were any other thing. Like, the chalky guys are going to be a little bit chalkier, so maybe moderate pivots off of the super chalky guys. Like, if I'm trying to think on this slate, I'll check to see what RG has for high-end or for ownership projections. I don't know if we have them out right now, but I'm switching over to DraftKings because why not? We'll probably have time. I'm motoring through this because I'm all amped up on caffeine. So high-end single entry, like, I guess it's going to be Utah guys chalky. I would just eat the chalk with those. But, like, maybe if Schroeder is going to be chalky, pivoting off to a guy like Ja Morant, who has a much higher ceiling. But strategy changes day to day, contest to contest. And yeah, $100 single entry. Like, I'm not a huge single entry guy, but I don't mind it. It all depends on the day and the slate. So all that basically to say, I'm not sure. Williams or Brown, center, FanDuel. I'd probably lean slightly towards Brown, but those are clearly the top two guys. Top fade of the slate early on. Let's see, the early games. I mean, you can fade most of the early games outside of Harden. It's that simple. Like, Detroit, Portland, not a huge fan of. Miami, Indy, not a huge fan of. Dallas, Boston, not a huge fan of unless Brown ends up getting ruled out. Brooklyn, Houston, it's really just Harden for me, although don't mind Wall or Wood or Porter if Wall ends up getting ruled out. But yeah, that's basically it. Let's go on back to Superdraft and go on back to the guard position. I'm going to take a drink of water. And after those three main guys, like, Kyrie's always in for a big game. Not a guy I'm going to have a ton of ownership, even at 1.25x multiplier. Hasn't shown a huge ceiling while he's been consistent, getting in the 45 to 50-point range almost every single day, and a match versus Houston is good. I'm worried about the blowout, and I'm worried about James Harden trying to do everything. Schroeder, 1.45x. He's doing a ton of this offense. Don't know how Drummond's going to affect him, but it shouldn't affect him too much. So he's a guy that's definitely in play. Conley, I already said, probably in for a few more minutes. Without Mitchell, definitely in for a usage increase. Multiplier is a little bit too high. Really like him. Luka, 1x multiplier. Already talked about him. Drew is a guy that, for Milwaukee, I don't have a ton of interest in Milwaukee outside of Giannis, but Drew's multiplier has been far too high for a while. They haven't really adjusted to it, and he's a guy that can end up with 50 points in any given game. He's definitely a guy, match versus Lakers, without AD, without LeBron, could end up with a big outing. So I will use a decent amount of him. Barrett, already mentioned, much more in play if Rose ends up missing. Should play high 30s minutes. Good matchup versus Minnesota. Really like him here. Booker, Van Vliet, both fine. 1.3x multipliers. Not guys that want to go too far overweight on. I don't see a huge ceiling. Like Booker, especially if Levine ends up getting ruled out. Don't know how much I want to use because I'm worried about that blowout. Morant, love him. Match versus Utah, not the same defensive team without Mitchell, although still a very good defensive team. But he's a guy that can end up with 50, 60 points any given day. Like very up and down, could end up ruining your lineups, but a guy that should end up crushing. Ingles, love him. Absolutely love him. Both forward and guard eligible. Will play a bunch of him in this spot. Like, it's just that simple. He can get hot from behind the arc in a 1.6x multiplier. He can end up with 7 threes in this matchup, which is already going to get you to 40 points. Add in anything else he does, and he can end up with an 80-point outing over on Superdraft of this multiplier. Already talked about DeRozan. DeJounte Murray, don't mind him. Not great. Has a whole lot of downside. Did pretty decent versus Sacramento last time. Great defensive matchup for him. So Sacramento, obviously terrible on the defensive end. Could put up a pretty big game. Chris Paul, fine. Buddy Hyde, fine. Theo, fine. Like 1.65x multipliers, probably where he should be. Better play over on Yahoo. Better play over on DraftKings. I think he's a little bit priced up over on FanDuel. John Wall, again, matchup versus Brooklyn. Mostly a guy that I'm going to be throwing in game stacks where I include Harden and maybe Christian Wood, just because a matchup versus Brooklyn, if he ends up getting 35 minutes and ends up playing, then he can end up crushing in this spot. Derek White, no interest in. Tatum, again, mostly if Brown ends up getting ruled out. Let's see. Ingles, Clarkson, Conley. Would you play all three of them in the same lineup? Yeah, I think that's a fairly chalky build. All three of them should end up getting there. Again, Mitchell, sitting right around a 30% usage on the season. Him going out is going to mean Clarkson goes from around 21 minutes to around 30 minutes. He's priced at 5.5K. Over on Superdraft, he's at 1.6X. Should end up crushing that price tag just because he's going to eat up all the usage like he always does coming off the bench. And without Mitchell in there with a little bit of staggered minutes, the same as Clarkson, he's going to have an even higher usage than he normally does. Ingles, again, should get into the starting lineup. Going to run a little bit of point because that's how they end up using him, and he's going to be shooting a lot. Conley in for a few extra minutes, a definite increase in usage because, again, without Mitchell in that starting lineup, Conley's going to end up shooting more, doing a whole lot more on offense. They kind of let Mitchell run the point a little bit, kind of going between him and Conley. So he's going to be facilitating a whole lot more, and he should end up crushing. So, yes, I have no problem playing all three of them in the same lineup. We keep looking down here. Again, Levine, very questionable. Foot does not look good, or ankle, whatever it was, the coach's exact words. So don't know if I'll end up using him. Kemba, don't mind, but only if Brown's ruled out. If Brown is in, no interest in him, and probably very little interest in Brown. Halliburton, I think, has some potential for upside. 1.65x can definitely end up crushing. Been in the starting lineup recently, which is eating into his usage, but the minutes have absolutely been there. Been really solid. Don't mind him. If Rose ends up getting ruled out, then I don't mind throwing in Burks. Could be some potential extra minutes, and I don't see quickly here. Obviously, we have Rose projected for in. But quickly, 1.65x. It's all right. It's not a terrible play. It's not a great play. Definitely a guy we'll consider using in tournaments. Him and Elf, I think both of them could get an increase in minutes just based on, or will get an increase in minutes just based on Rose being out. But it's always tough to trust Nick's minutes outside of Randall. So still looking. DiVincenzo, not really. Edwards, tough matchup versus New York. Low enough multiplier where I'm probably out on it. RG projections really don't like him at this multiplier over on Superdraft. Beasley, same thing. Rose may not play. Rubio always offers you a decent ceiling, but New York's not the spot. Smart comes a little bit more into play if Brown is going to be ruled out. Because, again, that's a whole lot of usage, a lot of minutes that will probably end up going predominantly to Smart, maybe a little bit to Fournier, but a lot of it's going to be Smart because Fournier had a horrible first game out there in his Celtics debut. Keep looking. Again, Kevin Porter. Don't mind him, but this multiplier isn't great. And so over on sites like DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, he's a much better play. How do you feel about Fox kind of liking Sacramento versus Spurs stack? Yeah, I love Fox. Over on Superdraft, he's a fantastic play. Over on TK and FanDuel, he's a good play. But over on Superdraft, fantastic play. Probably the top play on the slate outside of Harden at the guard position, maybe overall. Because of this multiplier. Like he's doing everything in that offense. He's doing a ton of work, scoring, putting up 30 points a game. Absolutely fantastic play. Really, really like Fox here. It's just that simple. But yeah, that's basically it for the slate. We kind of went through it pretty quickly. I guess I can look at a little bit of baseball, what stands out to me right from the get-go. I still have to do a whole lot of research on things. But right from the get-go, it seems like a bit of a mispricing on Darvish. 1.45x going up against Arizona. Arizona, decent offense. But for him, that's just far too high of a multiplier. Like, I'm probably staying away from DeGrom, Bieber, Scherzer, Cole in terms of baseball. Like, all of them are saying at 1 to 1.15x multipliers. I'd rather take a little bit more upside on these other guys. Castillo, 1.45x multiplier. Much better play. Nola, even against Atlanta, 1.45x multiplier, pretty high. Hendricks and Woodruff Woodruff and Glass now are the two top plays over on Superdraft for opening day. They both got a 1.6x multiplier. That's just a silly one. That's clear mispricing here. Outside of that, like, you get into the guys in the higher range. I mean, potentially Keller going up against a high strikeout team in Texas, 1.9x multiplier, could end up doing some work, but Eovaldi, 2x multiplier, fantastic matchup versus Baltimore. They can end up doing the work, but on Superdraft for opening day, Woodruff, Glass now, both fantastic plays. Going over to hitting, obviously the low multiplier guys are great. I'm going to check out Colorado, see if there's anything in Coors that kind of stands off the page. Turner, Seager, Muncy, all around 1.25 to 1.3x. Don't mind them in tournaments. Depending on who ends up getting into the lineup, we could see Will Smith at 1.55x multiplier, getting a pretty decent outing. Lux, if he's in the starting lineup, 1.7x. He's far too high of a multiplier over there on Superdraft. Outside of that, it'd have to be a random guy getting the starting job or a starting nod for any of the guys over on, over on the Dodgers. Looking through, seeing looking for some mispricing, considering the matchups and everything. Not seeing too much. I don't mind a KC stack. Mondesi 1.3x, Soler 1.3x. I think Dozier's 1.6x. Can't remember if he's in the starting lineup. Again, still have a whole bunch of baseball research to do. It's exhausting. Things happen. Check to see if there's any. Does Superdraft let you withdraw through PayPal? I don't think so, but they send it directly to your bank account, which gets rid of a step. It's pretty easy. Do you want to run it back with DVR? Yeah, I don't mind running it back Fox with DVR. It's just like, yeah, I mean, if the game stays close, Fox is going to have a big game regardless. Don't mind throwing Halliburton in there for a game stack, but DDR is the obvious run back at 1.3x. Murray, Podol, both of them are fine. Like, again, Podol got 31 minutes going up against Sacramento last time. If Whiteside ends up missing, then they're going to run Holmes out a lot, and it's a fantastic matchup from a defensive standpoint. So Podol, don't mind running it back with him. Murray, always a possibility for a massive game. Downside's pretty big, but 1.45x can end up crashing. Does COVID affect Coors? I don't know. We're going to be at 50% capacity this year. It's supposed to be 65, 70 degrees tomorrow. I know that's an early game. I can check out the weather forecast right now. I know because I live here. But we got snow yesterday. But opening day, yeah, it's supposed to be 70 degrees, which obviously not great summer weather, but this is early in the season, so there's going to be colder weather pretty much everywhere. But yeah, Denver's coming into a nice little heater. 70 degrees, 73 degrees, 75 degrees, 79, 81 next Monday. Gosh, Denver is just some of the weirdest weather in the U.S. It's just wild to me that we literally got a snowstorm yesterday. We had a huge snowstorm last week, and it was 70 degrees on Sunday, and then turned to 32 in a snowstorm the next day, and now it's back up to 70. Like, it's just wild to me. Yeah, but that's basically it for the slate, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, get signed up using the promo code Grinders. Get that nice little free $50 plus the matching deposit bonus up to $500. Get in there. Fantastic. Partnership with Caesars Entertainment, so you get some nice little player points there. I won bigger GPPs over there last night. Decent night, but only 8K for taking first and second in all their GPPs. Not as great as I'd want, but still, I'm not going to argue with a nice little almost 5-figure night. It is what it is. But guys, again, get signed up. Good seeing you. Don't know if we'll have this show because baseball and the schedule being constricted. So I don't know if we'll have this show in the future, but we'll be rolling out some Super Draft content. Next Monday, we'll have one for the Masters. Should be fun. Always love the Masters every year. Golf product on Super Draft is fantastic. But guys, get signed up. It's been fun. I'm out of here. See you, kids.